Brazilians. I asked him at the end, I said, hey, what happens in the Ashes? Who do you support? And he said, I support the English. I was like, well, that's kind of conflicting.
Okay, so we are going live now.
Okay.
Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you all to the second session of the CII National FMCG Summit 2020. We welcome you all to the second session, Fireside Chat, which is Winning in the Crisis. We have with us speakers Mr. Lakshman Narasimha. He is the CEO of Reckitt Benckiser. And we have our very own Mr. Bharat Puli. He is the Chairman, CII National Committee on FMCG and the Managing Director of Pidilite Industries. I would now hand it over to the speakers.
Thank you, Shribeta and Lakshman. A very warm welcome. I must start by telling the audience that Lakshman is one of those expat Indians who makes all of us proud to be Indians. Global CEO of a global company and a company that is very successful. So I'm really looking forward to this fireside chat. First and foremost, great to have you here, Lakshman.
Well, thank you for having me, Bob.
Most welcome. So let's go straight in. Yours has been, as one of the earlier speakers put it, there were two kinds of companies when the COVID crisis hit. Those who were on the right side of COVID and those who were not. And clearly your company was one of those which was on the right side of COVID. In fact, I loved your quotation, which was obviously much before COVID, which said, Reckitt Benckiser is a good house in a great neighborhood. And, COVID made the neighborhood really great. But tell me, start with just telling us, were you prepared for the crisis? And when it hit, what did you originally do and how did it all pan out?
Well, it takes us back a bit to September, October last year. We were going through a process of trying to understand why we existed as a company. And I remember sitting in our labs in Montvale, New Jersey, which is where a lot of our research work happens. And our scientists pointed out a variety of things going on. They pointed out that the bugs were getting bigger, the bugs were getting more global, and the bugs, actually, the insects, were living longer, particularly as you look at global warming. And as we looked at it, it sort of hit me very much at that point in time for the company and the leadership that the reason we existed was to protect, heal, and nurture in the relentless pursuit of a cleaner and healthier world. Now, the reality is that was sort of October, went into November, December. We tested with consumers, with customers, and in January, we sort of agreed that's where we were going. We, of course, had no idea about what was happening with this pandemic and all of it. None of us could have, of course, predicted it. But I started my year in China, actually, January 2nd and January 3rd. There was no inkling of it, at least in the way that the conversations ran. But about a couple of weeks later, I had a first call which said there was an issue. There were clearly, things with the spread of pneumonia in Wuhan. And, one of the largest Dettol factories is not that far. It's about 200 kilometers out of there in Hubei province. And the question was really around, keeping the factory open and ensuring that we produced as much as we could for that part of the world. And we ended up, doing that. But again, we watched it very closely. And of course, January 22nd or 23rd, when the WHO announced what they said about the fact that it was a pandemic, we sprang completely into full gear. And we had to, just given what was happening. And I think that what I would tell you is that there were a lot of learnings as we went through this. The first one, of course, is I think that what was very clear as we went through all these pressures around the world is this notion that why you existed was really quite important. It wasn't just for me, but for every single person in the front line. I think of a story of a second-generation Iranian immigrant in the U.S. in the Lysol factory there, who finally found meaning and said, look, I'm making this because it makes a big difference to the world around us. So purpose really mattered for us. Resilience really mattered, and I'm happy to talk about this at some point. But, people had to move really quickly. And I think what you've seen is the team really respond. Now, the reality, of course, is that in every company, it isn't always the right side, the wrong side. You also have things in the middle, and you have things on the left because your portfolio is what it is. But I think what the team has shown is resilience, and the portfolio has worked as we've gone through this period.
Wonderful. And, protect, heal, and nurture really resonates because in a sense, it gives you a purpose that is much larger than just the brands. But as this crisis hit, where were the challenges? Were there more, internal, and how did you first overcome the internal challenges before you went on to the external ones?
Well, the first thing is, we have to just recognize that whatever's happening inside with us is much smaller than what is happening outside. And I think we can never lose sight of the fact that what we are facing here is a massive human disaster, and you have to be humble about it. And I think the first thing we had to do was just ensure that we really truly understood what was happening outside. The second thing is how you motivate, mobilize, excite, incite, what happens inside in order to respond to it. And, all of us have, have things in our mind about what is it that we can do and what is it that we can't do. And a lot of that was put into question, as we went through this. Some of our manufacturing, some of our supply, really how you reimagine what is it that you could make. And I think we've seen that happen in many of our factories, many of our partners reimagine really what is it that we could do. And I think that was, by the way, a big thing is realizing that we're a non-linear event in what is traditionally a bit of a linear world. And the third thing is, once we've done that, then it's having the flexibility in order to deal with changes. I mean, when you have a business continuity plan or a risk management plan that has these 3 lines of defense, the first is a factory in China for the Chinese market, or then you have, Spain, and then you have France as maybe, tier 3, and then all 3 go down. You have to, because of the fact that there's a lockout in all 3, you've got to, in some ways, make things up as you go. And having the flexibility, having the trust in the front line and the team to really step up and, truly make a difference is, I think, one of our big learnings internally. And I think I really compliment our teams, our leaders, including in India, who've done just a phenomenal job in responding to all of this.
Fascinating. And, the crisis went on. Give us a little feel of what is the situation on the ground. How did you pivot the organization? By when did it, hit its straps again? And we'll then go on to the future.
So, it started for us the middle of January and has been nonstop ever since. And I think that, we announced our new strategy end of February. We went into lockdown in the middle of March in many countries. Of course, we're fully back and running in China and some of the other markets, but in other places we're still working remotely in many cases. So if I were to give you a few highlights of things, there's no question that our team in supply and our local markets really stepped up to what was happening in a way that I thought was, quite remarkable. The second thing is, we've really internalized the why we exist. We protect, heal, and nurture. Around the middle of March, as you saw what was happening, we made a conscious choice that we would take the equivalent of 1% of our operating profit and put it into a fund we call the RB Fight for Access Fund. We've essentially given that money away, and it's been given to frontline organizations, be it in China, product donations in India, frontline workers around the world, including here in the UK or in the US. But also really what we're trying to do here is also help us, help co-invest, so to speak, with a variety of other partners around driving behavior change, which is a very big deal. This is very important for the purpose to really sink into the organization. When we didn't travel for several months, the money that we saved from traveling, we all agreed was going to belong to the community, and we gave it away. So all the savings we had from not traveling, we gave it away. And part of it was what it did for people as they made decisions consistent with the purpose. They internalized it as well. So I think, to me, very important to understand that what's happening outside is bigger than what's happening inside. The third thing I've seen is, that as we've gone through this, we've really understood the value of human ingenuity. I mean, the way people have responded to things, redefined things, has been truly quite remarkable. And lastly, what I would tell you is that, we've learned this idea of resilience, relearned, I would say. All of us are resilient. I'm the only surviving child of 3 kids. My life early on has been characterized by, frankly, by loss. And it really brings you back to this idea that in moments like this, you have to be super resilient. I went back into our board books from years and years ago. We went back to World War II. And as you know, we're a company that has had hundreds of years of history. But in World War II, We know the Battle of London, or the Battle of Britain, and London was bombed enormously at that time. But what's not particularly well known is as the bombers left London, they went north to a place called Hull. And when they went to Hull, they bombed the living daylights out of Hull because it was a port, there were shipyards being built there. But actually, Hull is where Dettol is from. Now, we all know Dettol. I know this when I was a 4-year-old in India, when my brother fell ill, my mother would essentially have Dettol in the household. But I've gone back and seen some of the board minutes, around how the factory was in some ways dismantled. It was rebuilt in some of the, smaller dales of Yorkshire. And, Dettol continued because we knew it was needed in the front line. And so resilience is a very big deal. Our company has been resilient. Individually, people have been resilient. And it's much harder, particularly when you work from home and all of that. But this has really tested us. And I think what I feel great about is our team has really responded resiliently to what has been happening outside.
That is fascinating. In fact, even, one of the words that has been resonating since morning is resilience. And really, my question to you, Lakshman, is obviously all organizations need to be resilient. In your view, what makes some organizations more resilient than the others? As you look back at this crisis or look at the crisis still going on, what is making some organizations more resilient? They're coping better?
I think if you recognize why you exist and the purpose that you have and the role that you play and the fact that you matter, what happens is that you're willing to put up with a lot. You're willing to put up with a lot. I think leaders have a big role to play as well, both in terms of painting the reality, but also in a lot of ways painting hope around what the future could be. And I think we've seen that around the world, just in terms of, leadership really matters. And I say leaders, I don't mean just at the top of the house, but leaders every single day. Our factory manager in Wuhan and the role he played in ensuring people understood the importance of what was there. The kind of sacrifice that you have is enormous. I mean, look at a factory in Philippines and what they did overnight in terms of building accommodation in the factories. What the people did in China around ensuring that if people felt that they had an issue at home, that they had hotel rooms really nearby, ready to respond, because they knew what mattered and they knew that they mattered. And as long as you have that, then I think you're willing to put up with a lot of things. Now, obviously, you have to be prepared. You have to make the right investments. You have to think long-term about those investments and the returns from those investments. But as long as you're willing to understand that you matter and you're willing to invest behind it and you think about the future and have hope, you will be resilient.
Wonderful. In fact, coming to the theme of our conference, the theme of the conference, Lakshman, is winning in the new normal. And obviously, my first question to you first, at an overall level, as you look at this, are you optimistic or are you still pessimistic about the future? Back, in your, the first recipients of the vaccine now exist in the UK. Hopefully it'll all work out well. So just give us first a big view, the overall 30,000-foot view on the future, optimism, pessimism.
I'm a very big optimist. I've always been so, and I think I continue to be so. I think part of what you're seeing is you're seeing human ingenuity at work. When the gun is held to our head, I think science has come in a huge way. And I think what you're seeing is, just the human innovation come to fruit. If you go back to the Renaissance and you look at that period of time, and you look at the, I would say the rediscovery or the invention, depending on which part of the world you're from, of the printing press, you began to see actually learning, knowledge spread, and it led to a variety of things coming out of the Middle Ages. Today we have multiple printing presses, be it digital technology, be it what's happening in biotechnology, be it with what's happening in material science, massively important as we think about climate change and what's going on, multiple languages at play. And so I think human ingenuity is going to get unleashed at a level that we haven't quite seen before. The second thing that's happened with this particular crisis is it has shown the floodlights on the fractures that we have in the world. And there's no question we have fractures. And in these fractures, what has also become apparent is, in fact, that they are fractures. They are things that we have to, in effect, take care of. Be it the environment, be it what happens with the front line, be it with what happens with, inclusion more broadly. And, I think the importance of that has become incredibly clear. It's a bit like we're trapeze artists. Science, technology, art, all of it has helped us make all these fancy spins as we move from one swing to the other. And at this moment in time, what has happened is you see that when the music stopped, people fell. And when they fell, many of them were caught up in a safety net. And others actually fell through the safety net. Now, the people who landed on the safety net realized the importance of that safety net. And they really valued the person, the frontline person, who actually tied that net and said, my God, that person is really important. For the people who fell through, you say, my goodness, we have to find ways to ensure they don't fall. Now, what you see with vaccines and what's been going on over here is a real understanding that we're in this together. I mean, Oxford and AstraZeneca obviously relies on supply from India and other places in order to ensure that they come to life. So we're in this together. So human ingenuity, when applied together, and a recognition of the need for the safety net and the importance of the front line, I think points us to the fact that we're going to see new things happen. And the Renaissance actually unleashed a whole wave, another wave of human innovation and growth. And I feel very optimistic about that.
Great. In fact, as we look at the hopefully not in the too far future, the post-pandemic world, there's been a fair amount of change as far as the consumer is concerned. What of these changes will stick, what won't, and how will, our consumer really change going forward?
I think there are three changes that I think are going to stick and, be around for a while. The first one is digital. Whether you're a grandmother in China, whether you're a farmer in Peru, the shift that has happened to digital, both in terms of communication, but also in terms of interaction and commerce, is here to stay. It doesn't matter whether you're a TikTok user in New York or Moscow or Shanghai, the way you communicate has fundamentally transformed in this. The level of media consumption, what's happened digitally, has fundamentally changed. So digital is absolutely here to change, is here to stay. The second one is really a reimagining of consumer experiences. My mother, who's 80, was here with me in London over the course of this lockdown. It was her and me in a small flat. And, obviously it wasn't the plan, but it's how it turned out. And, for 5 months, I had dinner with her every night. And I hadn't done that for 25 years. But the fact that she's here and she and I sat, played games with her and all of that, simple experiences. And I think we've realized through this moment of time the value of those experiences. If you look at culinary IQ, people are cooking more, people are looking at more, shows. People are realizing the importance of small trips in the neighborhood. You see that with the growth in China. Domestic air travel in China, I think, is up 10% year to date. I think we're reimagining some of these consumer experiences, how food is cooked, how food is assembled, the role of friends, because there have been moments of time when we haven't had it. So I think reimagining consumer experiences is clearly an area that I think will continue to stick, particularly around connection and engagement. And the third is, I think you're going to see far more conscious consumption. I mean, I've read the stories of the people in Jalandhar who, for the first time, were able to see the Himalayas after, 25 years or whatever it was. And, I think the role of the environment and the role of clean is going to be there. Protection, obviously, very important. Local is very important. It doesn't matter whether you're in an apartment complex in Delhi, all living together, bandied together against this. You've understood the value of your local community and how important that is. And finally, you are going to see more value orientation. People are going to be concerned about price. So I think you're going to see three things. You're going to see digital really here. You're going to see a reimagining of consumer experiences done in a safe way. And the third is you're going to see, more conscious consumption.
And I'm completely resonating with that. And therefore, as organizations, how will businesses change? How will the workplace, start with the workplace of the future? One of the debates that is going on is, the lonely water cooler and the lonely coffee machine. Will they ever, have people around them again?
Look, I think, first of all, remote working or working from home has been a boon in so many ways. And many organizations, including ours, flipped to that almost overnight. And really compliments to the teams that actually made that happen, because we never thought we could, including invoicing from home and, remotely and all of that. The things that we weren't particularly well set up to do, but we did. I think the thing that about remote working is that it has also brought in many people into the employment, into the workforce that traditionally could not have been, employed, because there is more flexibility as a consequence of being able to do that. You never have letters from people in Sao Paulo or Mexico City, celebrating the fact that they don't have to travel 2 hours each way. I know in Delhi you have some of that, and other places as well, where people, Bombay and so on, where people do travel a ton to come to work, and remote working has made that happen. But there is a bit of a side to it that I worry about. And I worry about 3 things. The first thing is I worry about our young people. I worry about the level of apprenticeship that they're getting. I worry about the fact that they can't sit in a room and observe leaders. I worry about the fact that they're not learning by watching how things really happen. They're working from home. And so I worry about that. I worry about apprenticeship for our young. I worry about collaboration. It works really well under crisis because people essentially take the stuff off the table. But do recognize that, when you have new people come on board and you don't have a lot of the history, but you have to rebuild that, collaboration becomes a very important thing to watch. And the third thing I worry about is innovation. I think remote innovation, clearly there's been a lot, but the question about how sticky it is. And, at some point in time, you need to be in the room with people. And I think over time, I fully expect that we will be hybrid in the way we work.
That's interesting. And as you started by telling us about your factory in Wuhan and so on. Now, there's a lot of debate around, and Reckitt in many ways was one of the companies at the forefront of global supply chains, global operations. Our supply chains going to change? Is it going to be global? Is it going to be local? Or is it going to be more local?
I think in a lot of ways, and I speak, a lot of consumer goods companies are in a very similar place. We are more fortunate that a majority of what we do is actually done for the local market, in the market itself. So I think that's a real positive. I know there's a lot of conversation around this, but the fact of the matter is that I can't imagine that we would go entirely local for every single thing as an industry or, as a world. Clearly, we are quite local in many markets with what we do, and we will continue to be so. But I do think that, at the end of the day, we're going to be connected in some shape or fashion. And I think we will have more resilient supply chains, things that we are actually working on, plans, things go wrong, what would you do? More playbooks presented, more investment made in order to make sure that you're resilient irrespective of what happens. Because the reality is this, we've faced 5 of these incidents, so to speak. With this big pandemic now, but we've had, epidemics, outbreaks for others. And, as the world gets more complex and, as we grow, one of the things we are seeing is that the sort of cycle time between such events is in fact coming down. Some folks have talked about every 3.7 years there's some incidents that's going to, test the supply chain. So we're going to have to ensure that we worry about those incidents and that we actually work to make our supply chains as resilient as we can, which is going to mean certainly that we will be local where we need to, and we will rely on others when we need to.
Makes a lot of sense. And again, pushing the same thing forward, you spoke about conscious consumption. You spoke about, yes, and a lot of us in Mumbai never realized that, the horizon was so far because the air was so clear. What's the role of business now? Sustainability, climate change, it's been fashionable, but is it now time for us to re-examine the free will, value maximization, and look at us as greater stakeholders in society?
I think it's back to the point I made earlier about the trapeze. The safety net matters. The people who put up the net really matter. Now, I'm a capitalist at heart, and I do believe that what it has done is it has actually expanded opportunity and driven growth. But mindless capitalism that actually leaves people behind is a problem. And I think a lot of what is going on, as you know, is that, people have appreciated this. If you think really long term, there is no way to operate really long term without ensuring that the communities are with you. Having grown up in Pune and having visited Jamshedpur and, the Tatars are such a great example of this, around how they, in some ways imagined Jamshedpur, or they made the imagined parts of Pune, where they've brought the community along, and you've had, roles where They've thought beyond themselves. And so if you think about 10, 20 years, 30 years, we can't just think about maximizing value for our shareholders. We have to, in some ways, ensure that our rights to operate, our license to operate is protected. And that can't happen unless we think more broadly about bringing people along as we grow.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Like the realization, frankly, which a lot of companies in the East had, and now, this is one of the things that's actually being re-exported back, and hopefully this will, conscious capitalism, is like some would like to call it. Do you think this is a trend whose time has come?
But Bharat, it's not just the East, right? I mean, I go to Hull, which is where Dettol came from, and I've actually gone there, and you've looked to see, and I've seen pictures in our books, but also I've been down to Hull, the commitments we've had to the local communities, the technical colleges that basically fed us people, the workers' homes that were built, before World War II. There has been a history, even in the West, of that being the case.
That's true.
And I think that when I look back in time, I think what you'd find is that when we lose sight of it, we end up compromising our own ability to be successful long term. So this is not a real, fashionable trend. It is, in fact, the core of who we are, and we have to believe it. Because if we believe in the purpose of saying that we protect, heal, and nurture, in our case, protect, heal, and nurture in the relentless pursuit of a cleaner and healthier world, and look at every single word, particularly at the back end of it, it's broader than just our products. And we in the consumer industry, in the retail industry, we employ essentially humanity. And if we forget the fact that that's what we do, look at the large numbers of people that work in our sectors. If we forget that, if we forget the fact that we do, I think we will have an issue.
In fact, when you were talking about the old Hull factory and how they actually redid their supply chain to start supplying in World War II, I was reminded many years ago when we were looking at the Cadbury archives, you had board meeting minutes. The first public baths in the city of Bonneville in Birmingham were actually at the Cadbury factory, where they mandated that, the workmen would have to have baths. The first, the 7-day week becoming a 6-day week and so on. I think, maybe it's time for us just to remember that actually, when you forget history, you're condemned to repeat it. Maybe it all exists actually in the past. But let me now move on to individuals. And, you're a great example of a global leader. As you look back now, the crisis, one phase is over, we're looking into the future. What are your reflections on leadership during the crisis? And what are your leadership lessons? If I was, we have an audience which is over 500 strong of all FMCG practitioners in India. What are the leadership lessons that you can share with them?
So as I said, I grew up in India. I grew up in Pune, spent 5 years in Bombay. My father used to run a company. You work in a company, Bharat, which was a name in my household, right? Because my father was a general manager and CEO of a company called Formica. And, Fevicol was very much part of, I guess, the application of laminates and what you would do. So I've heard a lot about your company, your great company. And then I went off to America at the age of 24. I went with nothing. I went with literally, 2 suitcases and a pressure cooker. My mother, being a classic, South Indian Tambram mother, gave me the pressure cooker because she thought I wouldn't have enough rice, I wouldn't have enough to eat. And of course, I went around to the U.S. with this, with this pressure cooking, looking rather silly. But I remember, sitting in Bombay House, actually, when the Tata interviews were going on for the Tata scholarships. And Mr. Maligam said to me, leave, go to the world and, do what you need to in the world, but don't ever forget India. And obviously, it's a country that is very close to me and very close to my heart. But over the last year, what has happened as I go through this is it has in some ways reinforced for me some of the lessons that I have learned over my career. The first one is you've got to be really clear about the why, as Simon Sinek calls it. I mean, why is it that you're doing this? And in our case, this purpose has been something that is actually incredibly relevant because you know that there's something out there that's bigger than you. And if you don't feel that, it's an issue. The second thing is a belief in human ingenuity. I am just amazed There are times when you become pessimistic and wonder, my goodness, are we ever going to get out of this? And, I've walked miles here in London, with an empty city. And, what it has shown me is the resilience of this city. And I've read all the inscriptions on the walls. When there's no people on the road and you go on this 10-mile walk or whatever it is, you get to read a lot of things, which I've basically ignored. And you realize just the strength that people have, and you've got to believe in it. You've got to be positive. The third is you've got to really be intellectually curious and relentlessly curious. I've learned things about science. I've learned things about behaviors that I never really learned, until this year. And the asking of questions, the conversations with people. Suddenly people have more time, by the way, and they're happy to spend the time with you. Curiosity is a really big deal. And the thing you have to also learn is, finally, this is about people. As a child who became an only child, who wasn't one, over my life I've become a collector of people. And what I found is that, you've got to really ensure that you keep up these relationships. You understand that at this point in time, well-being is a big deal. There are a lot of people with a lot of stresses, a lot of concerns, a lot of anxieties, a lot of worries. And the ability to ensure that you're connected with people is something that I've taken away from this crisis. I try to consciously do that. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I let it fall. But it's a big deal for me. And it's a big deal for me that, we not forget that. So an understanding of the why, a real belief, an optimistic belief in human ingenuity, a sense about curiosity, learning, a sense of resilience, and just ensuring that, it's about winning is from the inside, not just from the outside. And the last is just the connection with people and ensuring that you're present, that you're mindful, that you stay connected and recognize that they're going through a lot. These are things that have stayed with me right through my career. And there are a lot of people who have done things for me, who have essentially, in some ways stood for me when things have been really tough, and I can never forget them. And I know that in this particular year, it particularly came to roost.
That is wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, because it really brings it alive. And as you look forward, do you think leaders have to change quickly? What new set of skills do they have to build? Do they have to cast aside some of the old?
I think what is clear is that as you look at the fractures in the world, what you realize is that not any one person has the answers to everything. Clearly governments are challenged. Clearly public institutions are challenged. The social sector is challenged. And you have leaders in the private sector who have a set of capabilities, who have to stand up and frankly have to go beyond themselves and become a lot more involved in terms of creating and generating solutions. I think the leader of the future, Joseph Nye calls it the trisector athlete, the one who operates at the intersection of the private sector, the public sector, and the social sector. We simply have to, in a lot of ways, do our calling. And we have to stand up and ensure that we are part of the solution and orchestrating and bringing people together in terms of making those solutions happen.
Very well put. In fact, we have a lot of young, FMCG practitioners, young managers starting off their careers in the initial stages of their careers. Your advice to them?
This is a tough time. And I know that a lot of them, including people who work at Reckitt globally, are going through a very unique experience. They're holed up either in their parents' bedroom. I know this because when I do my conversations with young people, I get invited into their homes. I've been into homes in Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Mexico, Brazil, the U.S., China. I've been into their homes. And they tell me a little bit about what they're, and I, by the way, have shown them my flat and, the fact that I had a dining table too. I was working on it, and my rowing machine was next to it, that I had a small sofa and a TV, and that's the way I lived. They've met my mother. They met my mother, and they know that I've actually brought her in. And by the way, it was slightly, fluttering to have her come in and converse with them. But the fact of the matter is this is a unique time. And the one thing I would do if you were young is just recognize that this time will pass and that you have to remain optimistic. And what you need to really think about, what is going to be success as you think about the next 50 years of your life, is you're going to have to commit to learning lifelong. Yesterday I saw some demonstrations in the U.S., the power of artificial intelligence and technology and what it's doing, and it's coming. There's no question it is. We're going to have to keep relearning and learning, unlearning as we go. And so we have to commit to lifelong learning. The second thing I would tell them is to say, be optimistic. This is all about the collection of experiences that matter. And I think we need to move away from this idea that we're a sequential collector of credentials. We've done this, then we've done this, we went to that university, we got this rank. Sort of a sequential nature of what we do. But really what we have to think about is it's going to be a consequential collection of experiences. And if you take that mindset that you have to keep learning, you remain optimistic, and it's about the experiences that you have, that's going to stand you instead, whatever you choose to do over the course of your life. But the most important thing is you have to be optimistic. The world is at a very important inflection point, and you have the future in your hands. And I want to see, of course, that our young people at Reckitt, young people in various companies around the world, that we actually stand up to be counted. And for the consumer industry, I just want to share one thing that Elon Musk said yesterday, and at this thing that he was doing in the U.S. And he said, look, it's been a long time since I've seen a new consumer product. I won't tell you exactly which product he was mentioning. I haven't seen a new thing like that for a very, very long time. And so we have to create new. And we, as an industry that has been about the redefinition of consumer experience, have to think about the consumers and think about what we can imagine that could be new for them. So for the young people, I'd say, you have, bright, fresh eyes. Help us create that new.
Wonderful. Great piece of advice. My final question before hopefully we can get in some questions from the audience. India, your home country, but now you're a global manager. You have the wonderful benefit of looking at it from a distance, but still understanding it. What do you think about what we're doing right? And more importantly, for the FMCG industry in India, what should we be doing differently?
Look, I think this is a question about potential. The potential of India is massive. And I think we all know that. And I think the big question is going to be, can we essentially come together in a way to unleash that potential? I think the consumption class has to, in some ways, really, grow. But I'm deeply optimistic about India. I'm deeply optimistic that a lot of the future innovation will come from India. And so, I have my eyes out for that. I think we're seeing that, for example, just in the vaccine and, what the terrific team at Serum is doing. They are a global company that is doing things that is going to truly help the world. We've seen this in many industries before. But I think we have to lean in and we have to realize the potential that is India.
Wonderful. Well, we can go on and on, but let me just check, Srimita, the CII team, do we have any questions? Do we have time for questions? Yes, I think we have about 5 minutes. I think
we have actually kept it in absolutely discussion mode because it was a fireside chat. So, and I believe Mr. Narasimhan has to leave by 2, so we have kept it.
Yes, I will make sure. Okay, so I will ask them in a sense, not a question, but overall, Lakshman, first, must you for your candor, for your thought, leadership that you're showing, not only as the organization, but through the last one. But as you look forward and at a personal level, what is it that drives you to happy, and what is it that makes you happy?
Bharat, you broke up a little bit, so maybe you can repeat the question. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. So, simple question, a little more personal. Seeing the exhibition of thought leadership, it's wonderful the way you brought the Reckitt purpose together. But personally for you, as you look forward, what would happiness be? What would success be?
Look, first of all, I think that I have a huge role to play in this company that I'm in. And I think for me, what will make me very happy is, of course, the potential of the company is fully realized, which, of course, is what we're all working on. And it's not just me. It's the 42,000 employees, the 21,000 shareholders of this company who are employees of the company. Because remember, we're a huge ownership culture in this place. I think to me, it's about mattering for the company and ensuring that our company fully realizes the purpose of why it exists. So that's really, in this role. I think to me, just personally, our world is in a very difficult place, but I'm very optimistic about the potential, as I've said before. And I think that, at the end of the day, each one of us has a very small role. One has to be humble about it. But if you can contribute in some way with the roles that we have and what we do to make a difference, that is all that we can hope for.
Thank you. On that note, thank you, Kender. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for coming to do this at short notice. And all the best. Well, if I was an investor, I would be investing in Reckitt Benckiser straight away. Thank you so much.
But thank you for having me. Obviously, it was great chatting to you. And I want to thank Rohan Sachdev for inviting me to also do this. So thank you so much.